And today we have a special guest, Daniel Johnson. Daniel, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Daniel is now in the jungle. That's what, professional CMOs, growth marketers do. They retire and they go live in Thailand. Looks like.
Yeah, get some nature whilst I spend all my day at my laptop.
Amazing. So we'll give a few minutes to everybody to show up. Meanwhile, leave us a comment. Tell us where you're from. Hold on. Let's make sure we're live everywhere. Daniel, what's your day-to-day look like?
Nowadays or back in the day?
Either one. How back
Okay,
is
so
back?
whilst you're traveling, there's a lot of things that you sort of need to consider that add a layer of bureaucracy onto your day. But essentially, first thing I do is I wake up. I'm very classically lover of coffee, so I drink far too much. So that's usually the first thing that I go to. I hit the gym. I need it for both my physical health and also my mental health. I think it's a really great way to start the day. And when you're doing something that's difficult, I think it allows you to do things, it puts stuff in perspective. So that scary meeting maybe isn't as scary, or that scary phone call isn't as bad as you think it's going to be. Then I have my stand-up with my team. And then we operate on a very simple process. So we assemble a shared to-do, and everyone is given a specific responsibility. We start from the top priority all the way down to the lowest priority of the day. And that allows us to actually know exactly what each person is working on, and that we start with the most important thing for us. And then we plan the next day, and we repeat that cycle.
It's one day at a time, huh?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we develop a lot of sort of strategy and stuff. And I think, one of the things that I've learned is kind of like the speed at which you learn is probably the most important thing. And, I'll probably talk about this in one of the questions later, but essentially, like, a lot of people are very intimidated about going into marketing, about launching a company, whatever it is, because they feel like they have insufficient information. And what I've come to realize is that actually it's not about having information now, it's about your rate of learning, your ability to absorb and action information. Because I've seen people who have been in industries for decades, and then I've seen people who've been in this industry for like a year, and they absolutely crush it because they're able to actually, it's kind of like when you read a book and then someone asks you what was it about, and you're like, I don't know. And it's a bit like, you've spent all that time and energy. What have you been doing? So in that effort, what we do is we always hold daily and weekly sort of retroactives, just having a conversation about, what do we do and how can we do it better? Pretty much that. The focus is on how can we do tomorrow better than we did today, both in terms of getting stuff done, having a higher impact, being more efficient, things like that. And that's an important part of the day. It's very interesting.
So wait, so bring us back to how did you get started in marketing?
How did I get started in marketing? That's a good one. So I never really said to myself, hey, I want to become a marketer. What I wanted was a bicycle, actually. I was a big cyclist when I was a kid. I really enjoyed sort of long distance mountain cycling, all that kind of stuff. And there was a specific bicycle I wanted, and it was carbon fiber, and I would think it was like 500 pounds. And for me, 500 pounds might as well have been £1 million. It was essentially the same thing. But I endeavored to get this 500 pounds, and the time I got pocket money, and I think it was like £2 a week. So, that wasn't going to be enough. And then I started mowing lawns, and, that was like 50p, washing cars. That was something else. And I thought to myself, if I really want this bicycle, I'm not going to be able to like do these odd jobs and really save up in, anywhere before a year. So I ended up thinking to myself, I need to like start a business, I wanted to do something that people would pay me for, but I didn't even think about it like a business. I just thought about like, what can I do? And that was selling what was it, selling sweets on the school playground, and then eventually that led to vending machines, and it was through that process of like, oh wow, someone wants sweet, someone will give me money for that, I will do that. And I actually ended up coming up with a whole bunch of different business ideas, and eventually I managed to exit my first one at 19 to a private equity fund in Austin, in Texas.
Wow.
And yeah, that was really fun. But what I realized was that for me, coming up with ideas isn't the difficult bit. Figuring out how to actually get people to use my product or service at scale is the difficult bit. And actually figuring out how to get customers is such the challenge. So I kind of refocused myself. So I try to answer a question, which is, what are the patterns that I see between successful companies versus unsuccessful companies, at least in terms of customer acquisition and really engaging those users. And that's kind of led to do what I do now. I ended up, after my exit, I ended up working in a bunch of companies as a marketer, starting from very junior roles to head of marketing for a few Series B, Series C companies, and then became a freelancer. And then I was essentially, I started doing this project, and I was like, got a bunch of leads, and I was working, and I was like, okay, bunch of friends. And then I had this guy who came to me and said, hey, I need you to work on this project. Can you help? And I was like, sure, here you go. And he was like, no, I need an agency. So I whipped up a WordPress website, presented it to him, and he was like, perfect, that's exactly what I was looking for. And yeah, and essentially that's kind of what I do. And it's really interesting because you definitely do see patterns. We're very fortunate to work with a wide variety of companies, but I see similar patterns in SaaS companies as I do a modeling agency, as I do Procter and Gamble, and a mobile app dev agency. There are definitely patterns which you see, and yeah, I mean, we can talk about that later. But that's a very long-winded answer to your initial question.
That's an amazing story. So what was the business that you sold?
Oh, so that was called Image to Painting. So that was a service which allowed you to upload images to your website, or my website even, get them professionally painted, and then posted to your house. And
Wow.
I think, yeah, it was a fun story. So we started off. Where was I? I was at home living with my parents, and they had a family friend who was getting married, and essentially they wanted. I remember the mum of this person came to our house and was like, "Hey, do you know anyone that might be able to paint a painting?" Um, because my mum's kind of arty, and she was like, "No, unfortunately not." But I did. I had a friend at the local university who was a fine arts student, and I was like, "Hey, yeah, she can definitely help." So I put them in touch, took a commission, and then someone else was like, "Oh, that's quite nice. How much did that cost?" I bet you it was tons. I was like, "Actually, it's more affordable than you think." And virtually through word of mouth, it kind of scaled. And I was incredibly fortunate because I think I learned a lot of lessons like product market fit, the importance of speaking to customers, how to think about scaling a business, supply chain. And I was living with my parents in a rural part of the UK. I didn't even know the difference between a small business and a startup. In fact, I don't think I'd heard the term startup at that point. Um, and what was really cool is that we hit great product market fit. We organically grew. I definitely made tons and tons of mistakes in scaling the company, but fantastic learning opportunity. And then yeah, the fund reached out to me and they were like, "Hey, do you wanna sell your company?" And offered me more money than I'd ever seen in my life. And I was like, "Yeah, absolutely," without negotiating or anything. Definitely to my detriment. But yeah, great learning opportunity. Very, very stressful. Very, very fun. Um, and it was I had a big think about like what is it that I want to do, and for me like the operations were interesting, but really the difficult bit is getting customers, because before this I'd run like 20 different business ideas that had failed. all sorts of things that are just fallen flat on its face. And like 99% of the time, it's, do people actually want it? And then do people understand what it is? Are you speaking to them in a way that makes sense?
Amazing. So what is it that you focus on nowadays? Specific channel? Is it just strategy?
So when I really started, working on marketing, I was a Google Ads guy. I was performance marketing, BBC, and absolutely loved it. But what I came to realize is that the boring stuff is the stuff that yields the best results. Like, for me, the better you understand your customer, the better your marketing is. And so I struggle to look at it in a very sort of channel focused view. What I try to focus on is, do people understand who they're speaking to? Do they understand the problem they're trying to solve? And therefore, are you using the right channels? Are you using the right messaging to speak to your customers? So I tried to focus more on sort of growth strategy, because I feel like that will give you the best impact regardless of the channel. Like, the channels are a tool in a toolbox, and it's not about which one's my favorite. It's about which one I think is most appropriate to solve the problem. Which I know sounds like a very on the fence answer, but it's yeah.
But then you have to learn all these channels, no? Or hire people that are experts in those channels.
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up on PPC SEO predominantly, and ended up doing a lot of influencer stuff in the meantime. But yeah, I mean, obviously, depending on the scale of the company, they'll have channel specific people, or people who focus on certain things.
Cool. Amazing. So I know that we wanted to speak about this fractional CMO role. I know that things are changing a lot. A lot of companies are switching to freelancers, to
Mm.
hiring. Often, especially with Mayple, when they come to us, we're a platform that matches vetted marketers with brands. They come to us and they say, okay, we have the marketers working on these channels already. We have somebody for PPC or somebody for email marketing, but we don't know how to manage them correctly. And so then we match them with a fractional CMO person, a person who can manage the team, set up the strategy. So how predominant do you think that is? Is it important? Is it not? Is it a trend that's going away? What are you thinking about it?
So I think a fractional CMO is probably an evolution of multiple roles that have kind of ended up resulting in this kind of role. And I think it's essentially someone with sort of unique experience in growing startups, often from a range of different perspectives, whether that's like both employee, employer, and also they're generally not industry agnostic, but they've experienced growth in a range of different industries. And what that allows them to do is use that experience to help companies sort of avoid mistakes, and to a certain extent have a almost like sixth sense of which channels will work and which won't. I think in terms of, I think depending on the type of fractional CMO you are, depends on the type of company you want to work with, because I think the skills required for a company that's pre-product might be quite different from those that have raised, say, a Series B. And I also think that the other sort of characteristic that I often see in fractional CMOs is good communication skills, because I think on one hand it's important to be able to have this experience, but also you need to be able to effectively communicate it both to your team and often to board and other stakeholders. And I think that's a unique skill, and one that a lot of people don't necessarily have. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, totally. Um, and I hear this a lot, that the average lifespan of the CMO is getting shorter and shorter. They go to a company, 6 months later, they're out.
Mm.
Have you found that to be true, and why is that?
Absolutely. I think I think there's a variety of different reasons. I think marketers often give a lot of ambitious ambitious expectations, which I think often they want to hit. But there's the problem with marketing versus a lot of sort of other industries is that we've got a lot of external variables that are unpredictable. So often we make plans assuming that these external variables will remain stable, and they often don't. For example, like if we're running a PPC campaign, we can assume that the CPCs will remain the same, accounting for seasonality, time of day, location, for example. But then sometimes they might be significantly lower, or more often the case, significantly higher. There might be a new update from Google from the middle of nowhere that de-ranks everyone's SEO. So there's always going to be those variables, and I think they're very difficult to communicate. And I think there's a lot of marketers who struggle with that. What I see is a lot of growth people, which I kind of consider someone who's ultimately not necessarily fully responsible, but their goal is to increase the North Star metric of the company. So people who don't just have their foot in marketing, but also maybe product and other aspects of the business. They can weave that in a bit more, and they have a better insight into other areas of the business, which allow them to set more reasonable goals. And I think we're going to see more of that in the future. I also think there's often a lot of expectations put on marketing and CMO. And when a business isn't doing well, it's often better, or it's easier to say, hey, no, the marketing's not right, rather than, do people actually want this product? Are we talking to the people in the way that they want? I think it's very challenging when you come into a company and you want to make big changes, because very often, that's, who are you to make these requests, and that can mean change isn't made fast enough. So I think there's like a lot of varieties, a lot of different variables even, and it can be difficult to figure out which one is the right one for you, or which one is the one that affects you. But I think being able to communicate expectations is a massive, massive thing, and something that a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah, I remember I was working at Solar City back in the day before they were bought out by Tesla, and they hired a new CMO, and he came out with the craziest ads. It was just nuts. They were like in your face, and we all went, okay, let's try it. And he was out of there in like 6 months. I don't know if the ads worked or not, but it seemed completely out of touch with our audience. So it's difficult. You come in and you want to do something big and change things, and it may not work.
It may not do, but I think the important thing.
So how big is your team?
The team varies in size. I try to keep it as light as possible, and work with freelancers where I can, purely because I find that's the most like adaptable process. And with startups and scale ups, I think adaptability is just so important. People need to be able to rely on you. So when they need something like tomorrow, you can scale if needed. And I've found that by having this kind of method, it allows me to reach out to people that I know are good, that are reliable, that are consistent. And it also gives me access to certain things like, say, video editing that would be really expensive for a full-time employee.
For sure. Very cool. So let's talk about eCommerce ads, because I know you have a lot of experience with that. Where do you see the industry going? Like what would e-commerce brands need to experiment with next year to be ahead of the game?
I think, that's such a broad question. So I think the fundamentals are always going to be important. Who is my customer? What is the problem that I'm solving for them? How do I speak to them in a way that makes sense? And I think still to this day, I've seen big companies, small companies, agencies, they don't understand the fundamentals well enough. So they end up just coming up with different types of creative, and it sometimes sticks, but sometimes doesn't, and that's often just like throwing a dart on a wall. In fact, it kind of reminds me of what you just said about the CMO at Solar City. And so I think the number one thing, I know, like, I think the most successful companies are those that truly understand their customers and understand how their product fits into their life. I was working for a big enterprise platform that was competing with the likes of stuff like Salesforce. And I remember I came on board and they had an ad that was basically saying something along the lines of, "Hey, we're 2% more efficient than Salesforce." And obviously the metrics were just awful. No one cared. 2%. What is that to me? That means nothing.
Right.
And we ended up interviewing a bunch of customers. So I'd get on the phone and be like, "Hey, what's up? What are you doing?" And they would say to me, "Yeah, I gotta go pick up my kids from school." And they're all in the same demographic, and they all had like young kids, and they would drop their kids off, go to work, pick their kids up, go home. And we ended up changing the copy to something like "Get home to your kids sooner" with our product. And by a factor of 10, we increased leads. Obviously, not all of them were relevant, but we just managed to get that alignment between what our product fundamentally did for our customers, because they operated in a very dry enterprise B2B space. This wasn't a consumer or eCom product. But I think the same lessons apply. Like, the better you understand your customers and how your product fits into their life, the more effective you'll be. What that will allow you to do is understand, how do we want to speak about our product? The things that I see are, I mean, I know everyone talks about it, but personalization is 100% the thing. And personalization is just, how do you want to be spoken to that's unique to you? It's kind of like, how do you engage humanity? You don't want to make it a uncanny valley. You don't want to make it uncomfortable. But what you want to try and do is thinking about, how can we solve our customers' problems using some sort of personalization. In terms of creative, I think dynamic imagery I'm seeing a lot more of. And I'm seeing a lot of like really cool technology. I don't know how much of it is actually going to succeed. I saw this product recently which matches your demographic and clothes, so that not only can you see what clothes look like, but also what clothes look like on you. And that was really cool, because you could see the shoulders were slightly off. And you'll also see dynamic copy on web pages customized to the user persona, which is again new tech. I don't know how long it's going to take before that becomes mainstream, but it's basically giving you just a unique shopping experience. And the more you embrace that, the better. But there are often a lot lower tech things you can do. Still, I work with companies that haven't actually gone through the purchase process themselves in like 6 months, and they made lots of changes to the website. What they don't realize is that actually it's a bit fiddly in different areas. The other side to it is companies effectively developing a narrative. I think a lot of companies developed a brand a long time ago and have stuck with it, and there's no why behind their brand, and it's difficult right now. It's not easy to, if you don't have a strong customer base and you're relying on, say, paid acquisition. That's a very difficult way, and for those who are sustainable doing that, good luck. But people don't want to buy a business; they want to buy a story. They want to buy a narrative. I read somewhere, and I don't know if this is scientifically accurate, but we store businesses in the same part of our head as we do other people. We personify businesses, and if it's difficult for our customers to have that, then it can be really, it means everything else is more difficult as well. I hope my long-winded answer has been mildly interesting.
That's great. You touched upon a lot of things. I think that's why, I'm in content, and I think everyone talks about the personal brand, that even employers now go and get their employees to post and create a strategy and, grow their own brand on social media.
I've done that with devs as a hiring. It wasn't really custom acquisition, but we worked with our devs who were really like credible and really they knew what they were doing. But the company was relying on like brand credibility from the developers to sort of say, hey, look at the level that we're hiring at. Why don't you come join the company? And that was interesting. Also culturally, sort of like marketing and devs aren't known to be best of friends always. So sort of explaining the why
Right.
behind that is important.
Right. And did they get starting? Did they start getting poached by other companies?
No, we just had more applications from people saying, "Oh, this is cool. Yeah, this guy who I've never heard of, but he was famous on GitHub. It works for this company. Why don't I come join them?" Particularly for like when you're working in a tech orientated industry. So, for example, I did a lot of crypto work a few years ago, and for them, their product was the most important, and the best way to make the best product is to hire the best people. To hire the best people, they really needed to just show like we're bleeding edge of tech. The cleverest people get paid lots of money to do cool things. Come join us. Um,
Right.
and it was like, how do you market like that? And it worked pretty well until I left.
That's amazing. Until what?
Until I left.
Oh, why'd you leave?
Oh, well, I can't go into too much detail, but basically they had a direction that I didn't necessarily agree with. Um, I think one of the biggest issues that I see across industry is founder ego being a obstacle to growth and success. And I think when you create a company, it's not just like working in an enterprise. You create something and it's part of your identity. So when you're doing well, you feel like on top of the world. When you're doing poorly, you feel awful. You feel like you're it's not you're valueless. And I think when you create a startup, there is a certain level of arrogance that you're going to often succeed where others have failed. And to do that, you have to that's what enables the long nights and the working very hard and ideally the innovative thinking. But also what happens is that people have this idea in their head of what kind of founder they are or they want to be, and as a result um, they end up ignoring data that's really important. For example, and I've seen this from a wide range of people. I expected sort of quantitatively thinking people to be a bit more objective in this, but absolutely not. Like I worked with a lot of corporate people who were like quants, and they left that industry, wanted to start a startup, and they would just blatantly ignore information that was evident because that didn't match with what they wanted as an
Right.
audience for their company. So yeah, and I think that's kind of why like you kind of have to. It's really good to fail because it teaches you a lot of lessons that you can only appreciate after you've been emotionally scarred from that failure. Um, Definitely, I mean, both like literally, you learn a lot of like, hey, why didn't this product work? Well, really, at the end of the day, no one wanted it. But it's very difficult to see that. It's almost like a bad relationship. You can't tell a relationship is bad when you're in it. It's often when you've left and you're like, what was I doing? Um, but you kind of
Right.
need that failure in order to internalize the lessons. I think everyone knows them. You can read a book and you can learn all the major lessons. Everyone knows build a product that people want. But I think until you experience some consequence of spending hours and hours of creating something that you deeply care about only for no one to care about it, it's either, oh, I was wrong all this time, or no, the people are wrong. So I mean, I've definitely been that person, but everyone does it. Men is like the only factor that I've seen that is a pattern is I would say men are worse at it. But I still see women making the same mistake.
Wow. Incredible. So we're going to go into auditing websites. So whoever's
Sure.
listening, if you want Daniel to check out your strategy, your site, your social media, your channels, whatever, just post your URL into the comments section and we'll
It's
review
quite
them.
interesting. whilst we're waiting for a comment, I think, when I got into marketing, it was really sort of how I want to learn how to sort of scale products. And through that time, I've come to realize how much of it is, marketing really is almost psychology to an extent. It's how can we get people to take an action? Because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is get people to do something. If it's an e-commerce product, it's buy this product. If we're marketing an enterprise, it's sign up to this webinar. We want the person who's receiving this message to then go out and physically take an action. And we've got to think about why do we do what we do? How do we do what we do? Because when you can figure that out, that's when you can scale it. That's when you can figure out this fits into this person's life because it makes them feel good about themselves in this capacity. That enables them to have confidence in their life. And what that enables you to do is customize everything accordingly. You know how to speak to your customers, which enables you to create ads that actually work, that align with your customers. That helps you figure out which channels actually are important. It allows you to figure out what kind of narrative is valued by your users. And, in the very glamorously named title, I think one of the reasons I've been able to sell all that e-commerce stuff is because you understand, it's by understanding who those users are and the problem that we fit into their life allows us to really scale it. I think one of the biggest issues is when someone is able to achieve some basic revenue but not really scale it. They hit this barrier and they're not sure how to move beyond that. And so much of the time it comes from that poor alignment.
For sure. All right. Well, while we're waiting, why don't we start with Mayple? Why don't you review what we're doing? Give it to us straight. What we're doing right, what we're getting wrong.
The website.
Maybe you want to share your screen and just show us, what you check.
Okay. That's terrifying. I've spent far too much time on this website in order to, so I don't know how objective this will be. Okay, all good?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So there's a bunch here that I think you're doing right. So the first thing I notice is two very clear CTAs at the bottom left and top right. So I know where to go. My eyes are drawn to that. You're following a conventional sort of navigation at the top here, which makes a lot of sense. And I like that because I think it's important. I think there's a lot of URLs right now, and I don't know exactly where to go. There's platform, about us, pricing, and like pricing. Why is there so much of this? So if you're trying to solve something specific, maybe this might be very useful. But a lot of people are going to try and explore and they want to be educated. They want to understand how you work and what you do. And this many options can make it too complex. I love
Right.
having a person above the fold here. Oh yeah, the other thing here is above the fold. That's great. I think that's really good. I think it's having someone looking at the screen seems to have improved conversion rates for pretty much every product. The demographic that works the best is woman across the board. If you're selling something to a woman or a man or anyone else that identifies as anything else. And I thought that's quite interesting. Obviously, A/B test everything that I'm saying because these are just my experiences and may not be applicable to you. But having someone look at the camera works. I don't like slideshows, and I read somewhere that there is data to support it actually reduces conversions when there is images that change above the fold on the homepage. The other thing that I really like here is the very clear value proposition. So I think this is something that a lot of people get wrong, which is essentially they don't explain the value in a way that makes sense to their customers. They either don't explain the right value proposition, so they're focusing on the wrong part of their product, or they explain it in a way that doesn't really align with the customers. Now, what I think Mayple does here is really good, is that perfect marketers. So they know that their customers have one of their specific pain points is we want to work with the right people. We don't want to have to be going to multiple people. And they want something that's customized to them. So for your business, I think you could probably make that more specific. Maybe not necessarily industry specific, but what kind of marketers for what kind of business. So is it a startup? Is it scale up? Is it companies? What kind of criteria? Here's where I never get a customer from Mayple again because I'm just complaining about the website. But I think there's a lot there that works. A couple of changes I would make is from a UX perspective, this text can be difficult to read. And this I think is really important, and it's kind of out of the way. People don't really focus on it. The text is a bit small. But Mayple is a platform for hiring on-demand marketing talent. That's pretty fundamental. I'd probably emphasize that a little bit more as well. Find your expert. I think that's good. And it stays on the same page. I'm not going to go through that just yet. So the other thing that I think would be really valuable is having social proof here. What other businesses have worked with Mayple? Because if you haven't heard of Mayple before, you want to see something that's going to prove these people are credible. People, including myself, are incredibly impatient. They're going to visit your website, and if it doesn't match what they want immediately, they're going to bounce. So we've got to give that information to them as quickly as possible. The way that I like to think about it is above the fold, your job isn't really to sell everything. Your job is to make it as interesting as possible so that they will stay on the page so that you can explain the rest of your product with them. So usually I like to think about it like, what is the problem that my customers face? Because I want them to see that problem and say, yeah, I have that problem. Okay, if you can help me solve that problem, I'm interested. You've now bought 2 or 3 seconds of that customer's time. So they're going to scroll down. Aha, perfect, social proof. Maybe above the fold, but again, I'm not really a designer. But I think that's really good. So they see that, they're like, cool, you've now bought a few more seconds of my time because I trust these brands, which means that I trust, indirectly, I kind of trust you. This, I think, might be a bit, I would change the copy a little bit on the header here. So I would say, is it a webinar? Is it a PDF? Is it what, well, not a PDF, but what am I expecting here? And how long is it? And when is it? Particularly if it's going to be live. What's the commitment? Also, the right strategy to 10x your business is very vague. It's kind of like, I could be an enterprise or I could be a small to medium business. How are you going to be able to 10x my business? I think the copy here is really good. Again, it allows people to feel their trust. This is cool. I haven't actually seen this. Okay, this goes to the sign up page. I think that's interesting. I'd like to see the stats behind it. Yeah, I reckon faces generate a significantly higher click-through rate than logos. What I'd probably also have here now is actually some sort of lead magnet. So, maybe you've looked at this page and you're like, I'm interested, but I don't know. So maybe a live chat. I've got a specific question and I want that solved. Maybe a quiz. So this is what I would do. I'd do a quiz and I would title it something like, copy takes me ages. So just bear with me what I'm about to say, but like, find the right expert for your company in 5 clicks. And then the quiz is industry, size of company, maybe growth challenge. Like we know the right people, we just don't know how to scale it. We don't know who we're supposed to scale. We've got mediocre results or nothing works, and then each way. And then maybe you can import that into a system. But really what that does, gives you great data, really, really great data. And people love quizzes. People, like, there's great engagement on them. I actually did that. I've done a lot of quizzes for products that are conventionally difficult to talk about on PPC. So like crypto, CBD, relationships, things like that. Quizzes often work well, but people like them because it's the same little bit of you that looked at a BuzzFeed quiz a few years ago and said, "Hey, I am curious. What kind of bread am I? Oh wait, I'm a baguette. That's interesting." Like there's no value from that, but intrinsically we wanted to categorize ourselves. But that I think would be a arguably better than here. I would also have more social proof. So if not here, just something like testimonials from people saying, I worked with so-and-so from Mayple. I had a great experience. It really helped me. And then I would also have a bit more information about, what happens if stuff goes wrong. So like, what kind of support does Mayple have? Not looking for necessarily detail, but just like you've got a team at Mayple who can help you out as soon as you've got your first question. We've got 99% satisfaction. We've got a 4.95 NPS. We've got X amount of marketing experts. Just something to make people feel a bit more comfortable, because I don't think the quality is necessarily the issue. I think it's like, how can I ensure that I can trust you? The other thing that I think would be cool to have on the page is some information about pricing. I think a lot of the content's there. I probably would switch the way that it's currently presented. And the other thing that I think is really important is that this is a really competitive space. There's a lot of marketers. There's a lot of marketing platforms. How do you position yourself so that people not only understand who you are, but remember you? Because if you, for example, it's difficult to remember two people if they're very similar. It's much easier to remember one person if you're not saying, hey, is that Greg or is that David? I can't really remember. So having some sort of, obviously we can do that through brand, but like obviously in terms of a differentiator. Mayple obviously isn't as like, a brand new startup, but one thing that I always tell to people is like, dominate the smallest possible niche that you can and then expand from there. It's so much easier than Blue Ocean.
Smart.
Yeah. But I think the web, and from a visual perspective, and again, like I really like how it's designed over here, and then I think this bit could be improved. Yeah. I mean, that's the homepage. Happy to go through the sign up process.
Let's do it.
Cool.
That was the idea behind interviewing you, was just so you could review our website.
Honestly, that sounds like a great idea. Okay, I'm really curious about this, because I think this bit is like, just people. So many aspects that people think about, like, people obsess about customer acquisition from top of the funnel, but not like, when someone hits the website, are we doing everything we can to get them to experience the value of our company? The core value activation of the product. And I think it's such a great opportunity. Okay, so now I think there's a lot of information here. I think that could be reduced. However, for a platform like Mayple, if someone's not going to fill in this form, then they're unlikely to realistically actually become a customer. So there's that. I love social sign-on, and it tends to work pretty well. So I would also encourage you to have that. I like the fact that there's no navigation here. You can't really do anything. I would probably have a live chat, purely so if someone has an issue, they're like, okay, I know I can speak to someone if I've got a problem. Now, how did you hear this is really, that one's kind of difficult because no one ever remembers really where it's from. What I'd probably do there is have a way to like contribute a bit more information, or actually just not have it at all. Really what you want is
select the answer.
What I probably have is just, sorry, go on.
I'm saying you would want to have options that they would just select instead of leaving it open-ended.
No, I mean, I would probably include it, but I would just keep it very like, I would take it with a pinch of salt, because 99% of people just write in the first thing that they can think of, unless there's a specific thing. So I think there's maybe a better way of like articulating, maybe something like, do you remember where you heard us from, or something. But really what I try to encourage is like, okay, what is the minimum information we need right now that we can get? So email and name, because basically if they bounce, we've got that, it doesn't matter. Maybe there's some sort of like built-in form so that this is recognized, so that if I now bounce, an email is sent. But like you just want to get that information as soon as possible, so that, because people often you bounce, even people who use your product, we're all distracted. There's lots of information. So anyway, I'm going to say Ben. Okay, this is really interesting. So what I would probably also focus on here is, instead of what marketing channels are your first priority, what is the challenge you're trying to solve? What growth problem are you solving? Is it you're not scaling fast enough? Is it you've got a product and you don't know how to go to market? Because a lot of founders don't know the problem, or if they do, well, sometimes they think they do and they don't. And I get it. Like you see this and it must be caused by this. But really, like, I think that can be a big misnomer, and going down the wrong rabbit hole here can be really, really difficult. Also, if someone doesn't know, they might not know, and they might feel a bit like, you know what, we need to write this down. Like, I should write it. Also, some stuff here is a channel, and some stuff like CMOs as a service, for example. Yeah. Maybe also include a little open box so that they can include a bit of context. Yeah, industry. I think company size would be quite relevant. I think what might actually be interesting as a A/B test here is, instead of having just this form, maybe have some sort of, like, I can't remember what the name of the product is, that allows the customer to talk. So you can basically record it and say, hi, I run this company. So over the past few years, we've had this problem where, we've reached this barrier in terms of our revenue. Now we need an expert to do it. I think it's probably our paid ad isn't efficient enough, but I don't know. So I need someone to take a look at that. And
That would be
that
cool.
would, yeah, right. And then they could send that. And that's often easier. The other thing is also, maybe you have it on the next slides, but attaching documentation. So one of the first things that I ever do when I'm speaking to a client is, what customer research have you done, or what information tells me about who your customer is? Because they're the most important person in the company. So I want to understand that. So if you can maybe upload information like customer interviews, stuff like that. I also ask tons of questions from my customers, and I'm sure it annoys them. They're always far too polite, but what I really want to get into their head and truly understand their expectations. And often I ask questions and it makes them think, you know what, I don't know. Like, I was chatting to a person recently about their KPIs, and they're like, we don't actually have KPIs for this aspect. And I'm like, perfect, that's a great, we can expand that further. Okay, from a conversion perspective, okay, you've now gone onto this page. I think that's it'd be cool again to have some sort of support functionality here. I've got a problem. I don't know how to speak to you. Actually, maybe my ad blocker is doing that. Oh. Okay. All in one page. If people do drop the page, they're going to lose the information, and that might be so infuriating that that they don't do it. Oh, interesting. It's redisplaying. Yeah, that was just me. So that disappears when an ad blocker is enabled. I would probably change that, because most people have ad blockers nowadays.
Yeah, good
I
point.
wonder if that's an AI or a person.
That's
Interesting.
AI.
So, this is when people are about to give you their money. They have so much intent right now. They're filling out that form. They're about to book a time. Let's get their money. Let's make sure there's a person on the other end of that where possible. Um, Maybe the first message or first couple, but really, like, we want to make sure that any response that we have is really relevant. The other reason why I just adore live chats is also they help you understand the kinds of questions that people have that will improve how you talk about your sign up flow, because often people come up with questions that you've never thought of, and by giving them the space to ask really freely, and sometimes they can go to the contact form and they can complete it and they'll get an answer in like 5 minutes literally. But people are impatient. I think that's one of the things I think about, like, who's the lowest common denominator that's going to be visiting this page, or this website. Can they find what they're looking for in the most effective way that possible? Is it as efficient? And if it works for them, then it's going to work for other people. The only really exception is like brand narrative. So I've worked with some brands who have such a unique sort of story and then they're very experiential. So like they're not focused on efficiency. I think be careful if you, as an e-commerce store, I know this is obviously e-commerce versus Mayple, but as an e-commerce store, just think about, like, do other people feel the same way that you do? Sometimes they do, but sometimes they don't. And is this just an obstacle? Is it cool, or is it just an obstacle to sales? There's also a bunch of really cool tools that I love to use to watch users as they sign up, like basics like Hotjar, Microsoft Clarity. I don't know if Lucky Orange or whatever it's called still exists. The other thing that I like on this, I think this is the HubSpot flow, is you'd be amazed at the amount of places that don't have niche specific times. So they don't have like Indochina. So they have the closest time zone and it would just be like Mumbai time. And it's like, I don't want to have to calculate my time zone when booking a meeting with someone.
Right.
Okay, so I'm just going to book a fake meeting. Hopefully no one will join that. Okay, that's interesting. It takes your email. Nice. So it takes your email from earlier and it applies that to that. So I think that's really cool, but I also think there's more information. So now that that person's booked a meeting, let's see if we can, okay, so it shouldn't redirect to this. It should redirect to case studies, testimonials. It should, let's get a person super hyped. Also, if someone's about to book a meeting, maybe we can have a page and it says something like, let's make the most out of this meeting. We've got a few more questions that are optional, but will really enable us to help you find the right person to solve your challenge ASAP. If you want to be really clever, you can actually customize, personalize the user journey by using some of the terms that they used on this specific page, so that you're addressing the pain points that they talked about. And then you can use that information as part of the sales process. Also, the more information that someone has given you, the more committed that they feel to the brand. Yeah, and otherwise, like, what you want to do is make them feel, because what they're going to do now is they've booked a meeting with you. They're going to be like, that's interesting. I wonder who else does this. And then they're going to go off and they're going to go book a bunch of other meetings with your competitors. You've given that space for them to do that. Yeah, so I sorry to all the designers and the team at Mayple for criticizing everything, but I hope you found that valuable, and I hope that works. I think the other thing is I've just received a calendar invite and an email. What would be even cooler is, like, let's get some more information, maybe a webinar, maybe a PDF about what does the process look like. I think one of the big common things that I find with SaaS companies, particularly that involve humans and there's a multi-stage sign-up process, is people want to know, what does the sign-up process look like? So in the most basic terms possible. And I think it's really difficult when you work in the company to understand that it's not obvious sometimes. So for example, Maypow maybe have, like, number one, have a meeting with Gal, and then number two, find the right person, understand the problem that you have. Number 3, find the right person, confirm availability. Number 4, test it out. Just having that and making it really like, how can we make this as simple and as easy as possible? And then in the emails, you can maybe articulate that there, maybe include a webinar based on the problem that they chose, because maybe they booked that, maybe they missed the meeting, or maybe they have the meeting and they have the meeting with a competitor. But now they're back in the email and they're like, oh, wow, this is an hour-long webinar solving the exact problem that I wanted, and I can hire that guy. Bam, I'm back here. I don't know what the retargeting is, but a lot of opportunity there as well.
It's brilliant. You could also make it pre-recorded, no?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you can. Like for example, if they say we're a SaaS company that wants to do go to market, we know where we want to go, but we don't know how we want to get there. Then, you can come up with a webinar. Speak to me and a bunch of other people, and we'll come up with something. And then, if people like the process and they think it aligns with how they want, Bob's your uncle, as we'd say in the UK.
Amazing. Do we have time for one more?
Yeah, sure. I'm chill. Happy to look at something.
This is I just sent it to you on the chat.
Time.
It's an e-commerce company that I was looking at recently.
Fascinating. So, okay, so it's interesting because I have my own personal preference in terms of like UX design and how stuff works, and then I've worked with brands that have sold by tens of millions more than anything I've ever run or worked with. And just to add some context, when we're talking about e-commerce, I've also run my own e-commerce companies. So I ran a company called X Flasks that did luxury hip flasks. That was a really fun product. I sold funky USB drives back when everyone used USB drives, and you could plug it into your computer and it would use electricity and little things would start running. So I've been involved in e-com for a while. And what I've realized is you look at Craigslist, it works. It's very functional. Like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Reddit's UX design took absolutely ages and actually reduced conversions when they updated it. It's a worse interface statistically. Amazon tried updating their UX about a year ago. Oh no, this is a few years ago now. What they found is they had a drop in revenue, quite a significant drop, particularly within the older demographic. And that was just because people had become so accustomed to their design. So when I look at this, I think to myself, wow, this is dated. But really, it's more complex than that. It's, sometimes stuff that you don't personally agree with works well. Now, I'm just going to give a ton of my feedback like I did. And obviously, there's some UX designers that may be watching this thing to themselves, Daniel doesn't know anything. Forgive me, but
there's always that thinks that about everyone.
So I actually think in some respects, this is pretty good. There is a lot of things going on here, but it's not too, everything's quite easy to distill, from my eyes, it's not complex. I would still simplify it as much as possible. So I think the logo could possibly be simplified a little bit, but it's fine. I think this copy could be simplified a little bit. I'd be curious to see what does the user journey look like, and then use that information to customize the navigation here. Which aspects are people interested in? And maybe there's instead of satisfaction guaranteed, you have top sellers, and for satisfaction guaranteed, you have a little star here that says satisfaction guaranteed. I don't know, something like that. But basically, above the fold is the most valuable aspect. So it's where I like to try and maximize everything. I'm going to try and find the slider of. I'm trying to find the data that shows me why carousels suck. There's a whole website dedicated to it. It's pretty funny. Okay, I can't find it now, so I'll send it over at some point. But it reduces engagement somehow. which is, I used to have them as well. I'm not sure how necessary this is here. I mean, maybe if the chat wants to keep it because they like having, just a thank you, then go for it. But I'm not, if it doesn't add value, like I think a good way is like, if it doesn't add value, get rid of it. I think that's pretty cool. Adds a bit of trustworthiness, but again, I would A/B test that to see if it's actually relevant. I would keep this as one image, and I would keep this as maybe the most popular product, so that there's a clear CTA right on the homepage, because there is a lot of stuff here. If you've got, I'd keep the free shipping like once in one page. So maybe if you want to display the free shipping again, you have it somewhere here. You don't have it twice within the same landing page. These images look really dated, and it does make me wonder if people feel that they're actually trustworthy anymore. So I would have that. Maybe they have a live chat. They don't. They also have trust card. I haven't seen this in a long time. I don't think people really care about it, but it also depends on their demographics, because you've got to think about who your customer is. If your customer is a 65-year-old whose main passion is wind chimes, then they're going to have very different expectations and have a different they're looking for something different than necessarily if you're doing adding something as part of your garden. Perhaps if you're elderly person who's interested, or older person who's interested in like wind chimes, then you use this as a catalog and you enjoy going through the different products and sort of exploring and seeing what's interesting. But yeah, think about who your customer is and think about if it's necessary. Popular categories, I like that, provides value. Maybe if they're targeting new customers, they might want to have some more testimonials. I do have a feeling like this is the definitive website for wind chimes. It just gives me that vibe. Interesting feature brands. I think the guides are good. Maybe a quiz, going back to that again, because there does seem to be a lot of different products. People might not know what they're actually looking for. These conversion things used to help. I feel like people got a bit desensitized to them. So thinking about, is this the most valuable thing that I could stick right here? They've got customer testimonials. I would definitely make them indexable. I would move them further up. I also like having a picture of the person. So like an actual face. It just feels so much more human. Also, something I'm seeing is actually video testimonials in page, even if they're thumbnail size. So like you hover over them and you can see what they say. Yeah. Interesting. I don't hate it, but I think it could be improved.
Yeah, for sure.
Wow. I feel like this is an education of wind chimes that I just didn't expect.
Yeah. Amazing. It's like an old school e-commerce website.
It really is. It makes me feel like it's very reminiscent to some of the stuff, the templates that I remember seeing years ago, getting that set up.
Cool. Amazing. Well, Daniel, thank you so much. Been super helpful, super educational. Loved your audit of what we're doing at Mayple. That was great. And it's good to have somebody do an audit that knows kind of our audience, knows kind of the pain points of the audience. So that's super helpful. And yeah, really enjoyed listening to your experiences, your stories. And where, if people want to connect with you, where do they find you?
Connect with me on LinkedIn on Daniel Johnson, or Daniel at wescalestartups.com. I love chatting startups. I love chatting growth. I'm very sociable. So if you've just got a question or a problem, or you're curious about something, like, always happy to talk. Not gonna like immediately sell to everyone. But yeah, feel free to get in touch. Happy to see how I can help.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. And we'll be in touch.
Cool. Cheers, Ben.